Hello, everybody.
Hey everyone, as you're all getting settled here, we're still missing just a couple people.
Okay.
That's okay. They'll trickle in. It's all good. I'm very happy to have Kendra Wheeler, Professor Wheeler, here with us today from SUNY Potsdam, Crane School of Music. Um, Kendra and I go way back, almost 10 years at this point.
Yeah.
And so some of you have met her before. I'll let her introduce herself a little bit and she can talk about what she's got going on, and then we'll jump right into the masterclass today.
Sounds good. Awesome. I'm very happy to be here with y'all today. And I'm very thankful for Kyle for letting me come to work with you all. A little bit about me. I am a visiting professor of saxophone at Crane School of Music in SUNY Potsdam for this semester, for the fall semester, as Casey Grev is on a sabbatical. And I'm also in the midst of finishing my doctorate, my DMA in saxophone performance at Michigan State. So hopefully I will be a doctor of music, of musical arts, come spring when I finish my dissertation and give my last recital. I also am doing a degree in a second master's in music theory. I received my master's in saxophone performance from University of Minnesota, where I also received my undergraduate degree in music education with Kyle and I's teacher, Eugene Rousseau. So yeah, it's been a lot of school. It's a long haul. It's a long journey. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm from Chicago originally. Lovely city. Love good city life. So a little bit of the rural areas are new to me, but it's all good. So that's me. If y'all have questions along the way, feel free to ask them, of course. But yeah, I'm excited to hear y'all work with y'all today.
Great. And so we'll have Phil and Maggie playing for you today. Who'd like to
Okay.
go first? No volunteers?
You want to flip a coin?
No, I want one of you to pick.
Let the young one go first.
Sure, I can go. That's fine.
Phil go first. So
I
as
like
you're
it.
getting set up there, why don't you introduce yourself and your piece, and then I'll put the score here in the chat for everybody to follow along.
All right. So, I'm already really set up. I just have to pull my music up. So I'm playing Three Women. And Nick was playing a couple weeks ago. Um, I'm very nervous, but
Don't be nervous.
I'm
I know
a
it's easy for me to say that, but
yeah.
it's all good. It's all good.
But yeah, I'm a freshman here at Tech. I'm a music ed major as of now, and of course, like I could probably add performance later on if it gets to that point. But yeah, so I'm just kind of nervous because this is like first masterclass period kind of thing. Like never done one before at all,
Oh.
and of course, you know this piece very well, so I've heard. So I'm kind of nervous about that, but otherwise, I think I'll be good.
It's all good. Is it okay if I call you Phil, or do you
Yeah,
prefer
you can
Philip?
call me Phil or Philip. It's whatever.
Okay. If you prefer Philip, that just let me know. But it's all good. I'm excited to hear you. We're all family a little bit, so to speak, here today. So it's all good. It's gonna be great.
I hope.
I just shared the score with you all in the chat to follow along.
See if my piece of music will stay right there. Aha.
And so, Phil, how long have you been working on this piece?
Not that long, like probably not even a month,
Okay. Okay. Very good.
2, 3 weeks ish. But yeah. Whew. I have my okay, I think I'm good. Am I just
Excellent.
good to go? Whatever. All right.
Good with me. Yeah.
So first off, I don't know if like anybody else here has watched Dr. Hutchins's performance of this, which I actually really enjoyed. So, but he read the little excerpts of the poem before each movement, and I'm just not going to do that. But the whole piece is just about three women that go through the troubles of childbirth. The first woman, or the first voice rather, has a successful childbirth. The second loses the child along the way, and the third has a successful childbirth but gives the child up for adoption. So, with that as background context, here we go. Uh, if I play a couple minutes, can you just tell me if that sounds all right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. All good.
All right. Ooh, hopefully that'll stay. All right. Well,
Yeah,
good.
Phil. All right. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very good. Was that your first full run through of all
Hmm.
three of these movements?
Yeah, all three like back to back. Yeah.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Great. I thought it was a great job. Did a great job. Take a breath, relax. You made it. You did it. Um, great. Yeah, many, many, many good things here. And I just want to talk about a few sort of suggestions, things to think about as you continue working on the piece, or for anyone else who wants to play the piece, or, so on and so forth. And I'll go sort of movement by movement, but some of these things overlap. Some of my comments will overlap. So for the first movement, a really nice captivating opening on that low D. I was with you there. You held my attention. I liked the tempo with which you started, but then as we get through it, be careful that our time, our tempo, our pace through the piece doesn't speed up too gradually or too much, or really, really at all. This is a very sort of slow, contemplative movement, as most of these movements are. And respect whatever tempo that you start with the dotted quarter. Let that be persistent throughout, right? When you got to the eighth notes, I think it started to move just too much, so our tempo wasn't proportionate. It's like if you're driving, you can't, unless you have a really, really nice car and you're going uphill, right? You're not going to go from 40 to 80 super, super quickly, right? Those gears got to change. So just think about your tempo, your pacing throughout. Breath control and then dynamics, right? So this piece in general, each movement demands of us control over the instrument, of course, in various registers, but also to control our breathing throughout, so that we keep the air always consistently flowing through the instrument. We never let it slow down or get super hot, because in a slow piece like this that unfolds gradually, we really need that fast, cold air going throughout the instrument, so we don't get super notey, right? So we're not feeling each note, each situation, each gesture, but we're going for longer gestures here, longer phrases, longer statements throughout this. And I'll speak more about that in a second. Another thing I noticed for the first movement and in general throughout would be to expand your dynamics just a little bit more. I think even more on the soft side if we can. And when we have a forte, which is not in many, many places throughout each of these movements, really giving it that energy, that excitement, that drive, right? Matching the vibrato intensity with the dynamic intensity, pairing those up so that we know that this is in a moment of arrival, if you will, a climax, if you will, something that's happening that is different from the contemplative, mournful, sort of introspective aspects of the rest of the piece, right? And I think that you are totally correct in the sense that reciting these few lines of the poem before each movement, I think it changes the game. It not only does it give the audience some context, but it puts you in a position to go, all right, here we go. This is what we're gonna do, right? It colors how you might play that particular movement. And this is another big comment for all three movements, and I'll talk more about it probably as we go. Observing our silences in the fermatas, okay? And what I mean by that is don't be afraid of silence, right? We get really nervous when we play, and especially if you're on the stage and the lights and you're hot and you're bothered and you're like, and you've got people in the audience, right? But silence is it is captivating. It can be really, 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 really beneficial to a musical gesture or statement that you've made. So don't be afraid to play with the fermatas, how long you hold a note, and then how much space and time you take after that note to the start of the next note. Does that make sense? Okay, so for instance, your very first one at measure 13, right? After this writ that you've had, then we might want to observe that. Okay, it might be better if I show this. So we've got the same statement as the first line in the writ, right? It might be a little bit flat. Okay, and then the second statement. There's no fermata on the B, but you can hold it out a little bit if you like, right? Really getting into the moment. But after you're done with that B, but then you can stay still, maybe don't even move, right? We don't have to change the embouchure at all, and then we're going to be set for that A sharp right after, and then we're starting a new statement. But that new statement's not coming out of nowhere. It relates to the one before. So that's what I mean by sort of playing with the silence a little bit more, in order to heighten the musical gesture statements that you're trying to make. Do you follow me with that? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
so just like overall taking more time, like in the rests
Yes,
and not
but maybe
rushing
not
notes and making sure everything's like phrases instead of like individual parts.
exactly, right? And always playing with how long you may hold a certain note or how much space you give each statement, right? Everything cannot be prescribed. It can't always be the same every time because then it gets a little bit monotonous. And my next comment was for side fingerings. Maybe using a few more side fingerings that will help you play softer, but also change the color. For instance, right where line, so measure 13, 14, 15, 16. Measure 16, you have a D there going to a C sharp, B, A sharp. I might suggest using side D there because we're not very loud. It changes the color. It's soft enough, gentle enough. And then we go down in tessitura after that so that the timbres themselves will match. You're not going further up into the long tube of the instrument. So I think that might also give, again, a new color, a new style. In the first movement, this is just something that Kaki and I have talked about a lot. When you've got the peak, the forte at measure 22, right? You're getting louder, you're growing. Be careful not to speed up too much. She actually doesn't intend for that to be super fast there, but really the intensity is going to come from the approach to vibrato and the crescendo that you give it. So just don't rush through that phrase. Consider each note a little bit more. Right, we want to hear the arpeggio. It doesn't need to be that slow, but don't rush through that arpeggio so much. Okay, without spending too much time on the first movement, let me go to the second movement and then I'll bridge my thoughts. Really nice job with this. In general, your approach to the piece was lovely. It was really delicate and thoughtful, and I really appreciated that. For this second movement, Kaki and I also thought about how we would group these fives, right? In general, it's in 5/8, and I think the piece lends itself to a 3-2 vibe. 1 2 3 1 2 1 2, a little bit, right? Without it being too cheesy. But she originally thought of it being as 5 equal notes: 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 throughout. We have come to an agreement here that because of some of the interval relationships and how the tessitura of it, or the contour of some of these lines, it lends itself to a little bit of a 3-2 feel. So I might put that into your practice just a little bit so that we can hear the distinction. So it's not just a bunch of running eighth notes, but we do have a particular grouping here: 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3, with respect to the phrasing, because some of the phrasing is not 5 notes and then 5 notes underneath a slur. Sometimes it's 6 notes and then 5 notes under the slur. Does that make sense? Like, for instance, the first 2 measures, right? You've got 6 notes in one slur, and then 1 2 3 4 5 in the next. So it's a little bit different. And so again, that would lend itself more to rather than just. Does that make sense? Can you kind of hear the difference? One is just blowing through a bunch of eighth notes, and the other one is paying a little bit more attention to 3 plus 2, 3 plus 2. The other thing I will say for the second movement is very Bach-like. She loves some Bach and loves a good counterpoint. So pay attention to harmonic changes too. Like, don't be afraid to give a little bit more. For instance, that 1 2 3 fourth measure. Now we've changed. We're on the D sharp. The harmony is changing a little bit. So what do we do to sort of not only let the notes signify that the harmony is changing, but that the phrase has also changed. Now we're on the beat. Ba da dee da da, ba da dee da da, da da dee da da, da da dee da da. So again, a lot of Bach influence here, and really just letting the harmony just flow throughout the movement. My second comment for this, so other than the 3-2 feel and paying attention to harmonic structure, I also want you to pay attention to the slight character change that happens towards the end of this piece. We go into a lullaby, again, a little bit more mournful. There is a character change, so there can be an approach change by us. We can approach the ending of this piece a little bit differently than the beginning, which is fast and maybe a little bit more, there's a little more urgency there. Now we're maybe a little more, again, mournful or contemplative towards the end. And again, this is where that 6/8, measure 30, I might suggest a side D there, right? Coming from the 8th note. It gives a different color than one's maybe a little bit more robust and the other's a bit thinner, gentler, if you will. So for the lullaby, just again enjoying the lyricism more, maybe more vibrato, maybe not as fast of a vibrato, but these sort of decisions as we come towards this lullaby. Do you follow me there? Am I moving too quickly? Feel free to just cut me off whenever.
No, it's fine. I was talking to Dr. Hutchins about it, and he had mentioned like at the lullaby section to not use like hardly any, if any at all, vibrato
Mm-hmm.
as compared to the rest of the movement.
Yeah.
So I was trying to mimic that, but I understand like both sides of the argument there.
Again,
I've just been the reason why I'm looking down is because I've just been writing everything on like note cards of what you're saying. So I didn't
all
want you to
good.
think like me looking up and down is like weird.
No, all good. It's just that I can talk, right? I can go. So if you have a question or something, just don't hesitate to cut me off at any point. It's all good. But yes, the conversation of no vibrato versus vibrato is something that actually leads me to the third movement. And again, take everything that I'm saying with a grain of salt, because this is your piece. This is your 3 women performance. It's not mine. It's not Dr. Hutchins. It's whoever. It's yours. So curate it however you like, but just always being thoughtful and intentional about the decisions that we make, is really, really important to artistry. The third movement. So I couldn't tell maybe if the pulsations in the sound at the beginning, was that intentional? Were you trying to put vibrato on that opening, or was it maybe a little bit of nerves?
Um, it wasn't as much as like, well, yeah, it was nerves, but it was also Dr. Hutchins was telling me about like using the side E flat
Uh-huh.
and the side D, and then just doing that and not being very comfortable with that, plus the slurring down, like voicing down, which I'm not really good at yet. So it was just a lot of inexperience, and then me trying to like cover that up by just adding vibrato.
No, it's all good. I thought maybe it wasn't an intentional vibrato, but that, as you get more comfortable with side fingerings and this little slight bend at the end of that gesture, I would say no vibrato here, like almost in an assertive way. Not that I want to dictate how anyone plays this, but I think the beginning kind of calls for a really still environment, and that includes our vibrato. So using no vibrato. Okay. And this third movement in general, we've got to connect gestures a little bit more intentionally here. What I mean by that, the opening has 3 statements of an E flat to D scenario. That is 3 sort of individual but connected statements that we have to make more of a big deal about, right? The first one's real soft. The second one is a little bit louder. And the third one is the beginning, really, of the piece, if you will. You can think about that first line as being sort of a little bit of an introduction, of introductory statements. And so how we connect those things, well, I would play with the amount of time and space in between each E flat to D gesture. maybe you hold yourself not very long in that space, that silence, and then we start again, but maybe the second silence is way more. And now we've started the gesture, and then maybe we add more vibrato. Again, being really intentional about the way this unfolds itself is really important. In particular, when we get to 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth line, where we start to have this achel thing, right? This stuff. Those are also, I know that she puts a fermata there at the end of it, but it's really less of a fermata and more of let the sound resonate in the space. Again, connecting those gestures more. They're not separate entities. They're not separate. They're entirely connected. So I would practice it sometimes without even a break in between. So going straight through the gesture to the next gesture to the third gesture, so that we get a sense of, again, how harmony is unfolding itself or how the notes are unfolding itself. But we also get a sense of connection, and then go back and put in the rest. But it really depends on those fermatas, and this is something that I've talked about with her. It's more about letting that echo in the room, really, like the space, let it reverberate around you, but still think about sound still happening, right? Sound doesn't stop. Even if we are not making it physically, the sound is still happening, so that when the second gesture comes in, it's not a new entity, it's a continuation of the same thing. And then you do it 3 times. So we must make each entrance maybe a little bit different, or color it just slightly different. But that's a really big, I think, important part for that middle section there. Each of those statements connected for sure. Sound still happening even if you're not making it. And then the very end of it, we've got, again, we're back to mournful, contemplative, insert whichever word resonates with you the most, okay? And we've got descending intervals here, okay? We start with the half step, and then we've got a third, and then we've got a fifth. Now, thirds are really symbolic of lullaby things, children's songs, stuff like that. The fifth is what gives us maybe more of a sense of an arrival, like we've ended just a little bit because of that fifth relationship. 5 to 1, always this semblance, right? I would suggest you take more time getting through the end. Don't let yourself rush through it, okay? And maybe even on the second statement of the F to D, you use side D there. I don't know. Play with the colors a little bit, but definitely play with the time more. These are the final statements of this piece. We've arrived now after going through this difficult, sad, mournful journey. So let yourself enjoy that a little bit more. And don't be afraid of that low E flat to D situation. All of her falls are gestural. She doesn't really care about what note you necessarily fall to, but it's the gesture of the sigh. It's always a sigh. Each of these downward trajectory falls or whatever, she may have a note indicated there, but it's actually really symbolic of sighs, relief, grief, pain, suffering, these things. So it's just finding a way to emulate that rather than having a strict destination in terms of pitch. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like I haven't thought about just how much emotion goes into each piece yet. So that's why most of the comments are talking about the phrasing and emotions and stuff like that.
Definitely. Yes, indeed. So the big overarching comments are: take more time, right? Always phrase intentionally. Okay, don't be afraid of the silences, and then utilize a more dynamic palette so that we get different colors. That may mean using side fingerings in different places. And always think about connecting gestures. Nothing is rarely with her in this piece fragmented. Everything is connected, even if you see space or rest. Okay? Very good.
All right, thank you.
Excellent job. Thank you, Phil. I appreciate you.
Very nice. And I think next up we have Maggie playing for you.
Excellent.
Hi. I'll be playing Black and Blue today, by Barry Cockcroft. I had masterclass with you, but I got to meet you last semester, so
Indeed.
I don't know if I need to introduce myself again, but now I'm a sophomore. I'm a music ed and saxophone performance major, and yeah. So I'm gonna try to play the entirety of the piece. I just learned the 5th page yesterday.
I love it. Good.
It's gonna be a little rough.
I'm excited.
Okay, I'm gonna play a few notes and tell me if it's too loud so I can turn my mic down
Absolutely.
for you.
I think that should be fine. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, Maggie. All right. Very good. Just learning the 5th page. You didn't even need to tell me that. Couldn't tell. Okay. Great job. You great job getting through this piece. All the technical work. All the multiphonic work. Really great job. I actually only have one really sort of I think quite important but really overarching comment for the whole thing, because you're flying through the technique, you're getting all the multiphonics out. It's great. And that one big thing is time, rhythm. right? So this is like, you are a one woman show here throughout this piece. You've got it all. You are the bass, you are the drums, you are the electric guitar, you are the soloist, you are the whole show. You're the whole combo. And so that presents a little bit of difficulty, of course, but you maneuvered through being that whole one woman show really well. The only thing was that sometimes our sense of just groove, right, was a little bit rushed, I think, in some places, especially when we get to, any sort of melodic, rhythmic riff, any riff that happens throughout. So the opening, if we were to give this an instrument, probably would be like, I could see like a bass guitar, boo bop, right? Just really laying down that little 2-note riff, right? And so can you just play? Yeah, just the opening 2 lines, and really try to hone in on what your time is. If you can, try to hear time happening behind you. If you had like a drummer behind you, keeping that, right? Can you just try that opening like 2 lines? Good. Okay. And so how do you think of this piece? Is it in like 2 for you? So 1, 2, 3, 4. Like on 1 and 3? Do you think about it on 2 and 4? Or do you think about it in 4 separate beats? Like 1, 2, 3, ba bop, ba bop.
I guess 4 separate beats.
So you're thinking about it in 4?
I guess.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. So if we're thinking about it in 4, right? Again, we are a one-woman show, and we have syncopation. It's a little bit difficult because we don't have anything to base that syncopated part off of, right? And so sometimes this comes in with just the breath itself. Do, do, if we're going to think about it in 4, right? So 1, 2, 3, boop, boop. And that's slower than what your tempo was. But I would go through then with, a doctor beat or any sort of metronome and play around with how you practice it. Put it on big beats 1 and 3. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's on 1 and 3. If you put it on 2 and 4, it's going to give you a different feel. It probably will actually be a little more challenging, but 2 and 4 might be how we want to feel it just a little bit more, so that we get in the mindset of what a syncopated feels like, okay? And then that will, I think, position us better once we get to line 3, but boo-ah, boo-ba, boo-ah, right? These things. So, can you now play the 3rd line for me?
Mm-hmm. Can I do the pickup at 9?
Oh, of course.
Cool.
Yeah, good. Your time was great there. I love the inflections that you're doing as well.
Thank you.
Spot on. Okay, no, we're just gonna work our way. I promise I'm not gonna make you play the whole piece line by line. I mostly want to highlight some time things and issues. Okay, so the measure 18 is this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th line. Can you now play that for me? 5th and 6th line. Yeah, good. And so as you're getting through, right, like measure 18 and measure 22, I feel maybe that you want to press forward a little bit, that we're urgent to get through the line, but it's a blues, so we got all the time in the world to get through this riff, right? We want to be on the back end of that beat as much as possible throughout this blues influence piece. So, I mean, again, I would just encourage you to go through with metronome on various sort of metrical feels, so that we can pull ourselves back just a little bit, because you're doing all this great work with the technique and the multiphonics. The only thing that's missing, and the style as well, you're putting it inflection, is just our comfort in the time itself, not pushing forward. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's really all I have to say, Maggie. That was great. The one big thing is that just time and feel, really getting that in our head. But you nailed all the multiphonics. The key clicks were great. It was a little bit hard for me to hear on Zoom, but I think they were great. And then the wah wah effect on this last page. This would my other comment too would be, while it's all loud, is there a way that we can shape that a little bit more? So maybe we don't start it at a fortissimo and we work our way through it so that we can gain some textural. There's not really melodic interest here until the very end, but throughout all that wah wah effect, electric guitar, 1960s rock, right? That's what we're channeling. And so I might go in and actually just put in a few dynamic sort of markers so that I myself, while playing it, do not get bored, and my audience also doesn't get bored. He starts to change the melodic contour towards the third line, or kind of the second line, but that's a long way to go. So, yeah. Any I guess other questions or thoughts you have? Really great job throughout.
I don't know if I have any questions. Yeah, definitely time is like I got really nervous, so I started speeding up because I started thinking about the wah-wah section on the first page. So I started getting really anxious.
No, you did great, Maggie. I mean, that you shouldn't have even told me that you just started learning that 5th page because I couldn't tell. It was great.
I thought it was gonna go a lot worse than how it went. So that's probably the best I've ever played it.
Congratulations. Yes. Yeah, that's it. That's all I have.
Okay.
There we go. Excellent.
Thank you.
Great job, Maggie and Phil. It was a pleasure to hear you both play today. Y'all have any questions or anything like that? That's cool if you don't.
No one has any questions for Professor Wheeler?
Sure, I'll go. So how are you adapting to the new kind of virtual world that is 2020? Like, what are you doing differently now that you weren't doing a year ago, as far as working on things, but then also finding ways to put that out there?
Yeah, that's a challenge. Being on Zoom all of the time is really difficult, and it drains, at least me in my experience, so much more than I think in person teaching and like rehearsals and stuff like that goes. I just get so much more tired on Zoom. But I actually find myself listening a lot more since we've been virtual. I've had a lot more control over what I practice, when I practice, and how I practice, which is, odd a little bit, but it's allowed me more time to get into transcriptions. It's allowed me more time to, like I said, listen. I've been able to focus my practicing in a different kind of way. So it's like when I'm at a full height schedule and before all of this virtual stuff started happening, it was really strict, like my window for practicing. Like it either had to happen in those morning hours, or it had to happen in like some block of the evening where I really probably shouldn't have been practicing anyway because I was tired. But now I can do it, a little bit here. The way I like to practice is a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit later. Like I'm popping all over the place with my practicing, and I actually find this focuses me more. Like every time I go to the instrument, I'm like, yes, this is like, I'm ready to do it. And then I take my break, I go do whatever I need to do, and then come back to the instrument. So I would say yes. It's difficult being in isolation. This is not good, I think, for anyone, but of course, music making and musicians. Teaching over Zoom is a drag. It's not fun. Very tiring. But, the small, I think, things that work out is that I've been listening. I've had time to do my transcriptions. You can reading more, like anything. I'm able to get into a few other things that I probably couldn't have if we were strictly in person all of the time still. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Zoom sucks. Sitting through 3 lectures on Zoom is 10 times worse than sitting through 3 lectures in person.
Those 3-hour seminars that you were already dreading have now become about 8 hours long, right? It's just every minute exhausts you. I understand. Y'all have any more questions or thoughts or anything in general?
What are you practicing right now?
I am practicing the Sunny Stit. Well, okay, I was doing two things. I was trying to finish Autumn Leaves a Cannonball solo, but he is like really quite difficult to transcribe. His time is insane. So I gave up on that a little bit, but I've actually learned I've learned a good majority of it, but I got Rhythm, Sunny Stit. I'm trying to transcribe that right now to get my Sunny Stit chops up. That's for the jazz stuff. Classical wise, I've been playing Pieces Françaises. My French is poor. But it's by Ferdinand Ducruc. It's like 8 short, cute movements. I really like Ducruc. Boussade's Kundalini, I've been dabbling in. It's a more contemporary solo piece for saxophone. Inga Bretson's She Sings, She Screams, also with electronics, fixed electronics, and my scales, of course. I've been finding new joy in playing my scales and fundamental stuff, overtones, all this stuff. Yeah, it's kind of what I've been digging into these days.
Which album is that I Got Rhythm from?
Oof, I don't even remember. Not off the top of my head right now. I should know that though. Let me think about that for a second.
I did one of his I Got Rhythms this summer. It's very hard.
yeah.
Is it the one that's like 300?
Yes. It's like 3 minutes long, and he blows. Oh, you know what I mean? The entire time, and it's like, whoo, burning. Taking that real slow right now. So I just started that. How about you all? Those of you that didn't play today, what are y'all working on? Jazz or classical stuff?
Right now, I'm transcribing Paul Desmond solo from Autumn Leaves with Chet Baker.
Love this solo. It's a great solo. Very nice. Anyone else?
I'm working on 3 romances, but on soprano.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the Creston, working on that for my junior recital.
Ooh.
And I will be working on Storm, which is a piece with electronics as well, but on tenor.
Very nice. All right.
Judith Shatton, the composer.
Okay. Got you. Nice. When's your junior recital?
Next semester in March.
April.
In April?
April, yes.
Okay. Very good. Good luck to you in all those months from now. All right. Any other questions or thoughts? Anyone else want to share anything?
Do you want to talk about your dissertation?
Oh, yes. Wow. Okay. So, part of the 2 things that I have left for my doctorate, dissertation, recital. One of those things is significantly more difficult than the other. And it's not the recital, right? It's the dissertation. And I've been writing on for a while now, because I love me some good political stuff. I'm a very sort of political person. I am in it, and we can talk about all the things. And I think that it's really a shame for any musician, and especially musician educators, performers, anyone really, whatever discipline you are in, to try to ignore any socio-political things happening, because for musicians particularly, what you do is political. It is social. It involves people. It's communication. And so my dissertation is broadly talking about music and identity and why it's important to think about these 2 things. But it goes into sort of a guide for understanding how concepts of identity, privilege, race, gender, class, intersectionality all matter to us as performers and educators. And so it's in the context of saxophonists, but these things can be applied to flutists and oboe players, anyone really, but it will be in that context. And so, like I said, it really sort of walks it's a short guide. It's not going to be super theoretical in the sense. I want it to be really accessible for everyone to read and understand. Like, this is how intersectionality works, and this is why it matters to us as educators in performance. This is what privilege is, right? Because we talk about privilege a lot, but we don't really, I think, understand the root sort of foundational reasons why talking about privilege can be so uncomfortable. So it talks about this, and then it says, this is why we should understand this as performers and educators. So aside from those concepts, then I also do sort of, I put them into practice with a particular piece that I talk about as being a bit problematic in terms of representation, imagery, and identity, right? And so, it walks through that sort of thing. Do y'all follow me as I'm talking about it? As you can see, all the thoughts are still flowing out of my head, but I'm still working on that 2-minute elevator speech about my dissertation. Questions on that, or thoughts on that, or anything else?
I think it's pretty interesting because for me particularly, like I'm Jewish, and throughout my entire college education, a lot of people have like basically fetishized Wagner, and they're like, "Oh, he's such a good composer. He did all these things." And I'm like, "Yeah, but he's anti-Semitic." And they're like, "Yeah, but have you heard The Ring?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
they just like always put it to the wayside, and I find that really interesting.
Yeah, those but statements, people got to be careful about those, right? If you think about what you're about to say after the word but, and if it's not right, don't say it, right? But yeah, it also relates to the wider conversations that a lot of people are having in classical music, which is, we have all of these composers and we have put them on a pedestal and we think that their music is great compositionally. But them as a person, they are problematic, or they were problematic, right? There's a handful of German composers that were anti-Semitic, racist in general, and we have a lot of music that we use by them. But it begs also for a little bit more in-depth conversation, one that we probably can't have right now, but I'd love to have at some point, and that is also how German composers and their music was used by critics after they died for Nazi propaganda, right? So Hitler loved Wagner. Wagner didn't really care about Hitler so much, at least when he was alive, okay? Not to say that Wagner was not anti-Semitic, because he was, but a lot of like the Nazi propaganda that was made and created and used his music happened after Wagner died. And this happened with a lot of composers. Like, Bach was not all hail J.S. Bach when he was alive necessarily. I mean, it was a little bit, but after he died, a lot of critics upheld him, right? They put his stuff out there, said this is great. The same thing happened with Mozart. The same thing happened with a handful of composers, where after they died, they then gained genius status. And music theory aided in the ability to either to canonize music and call it genius and great, and we have issues with music theory too for that. There's a lot of stuff wrapped up in it, but the point being that music and identity matters. Art matters. Art is culture, and how we show representations of people, especially oppressed people, underrepresented people, in art matters, and it needs to be understood, right? If it is contributing to the oppressive state of those people, it probably shouldn't be done. If it is challenging the system in some way, getting people to think, dismantling stereotypes, biases, judgments, all of these things, then that art has merit. It has, it is doing something. But we just have to be careful about identity and representation in art, and the voices that we use and how we use those voices, right? It's really kind of important. Not to like preach all this stuff at you all like that, because I will go. You got to stop me. You just really have to shut me up. Thoughts on that or stuff? Anything? I don't know. Okay. Food for thought on your Thursday afternoon. But really, I encourage you all to think about these things as you go on in your educational careers, music careers, especially as music educators. Be thoughtful about the music you program and why you program it. That doesn't mean that you cannot program a Wagner, for instance, or you cannot program Bach or Brahms, but just being thoughtful about curating programs, I think.
How do you think about curating a program then?
Yeah, it goes into a lot, I think. I mean, a lot goes into that, how to curate a program, right? It's what event am I playing for? Who will my audience be? And, if those things don't matter and it's just a recital, then it's what kind of music do I want to use to challenge my own artistry, right? What kind of aesthetic things do I like? And can I find examples of those things by composers that have been overlooked, either on purpose or unintentionally, just because we favor the same sort of music by the same people, right? If I'm going to play for, I don't know, the Women's March, okay, or they're having an event and hosting it, well, maybe then I want to play music by a certain group of people. Maybe that's by all women, women of color, LGBTQ plus women. The event might color my program a little bit there. Again, if you're playing your senior recital, maybe you want to deliberately go out and find composers that are not canonized in saxophone repertoire, that are not from the French tradition. And so, just that in itself is a thought to curate a program, right? Then you know that you're going to look at things that are not, again, French composers probably. And you're going to try to find music by maybe more American composers, people of color, women, things like that. And that will dictate also your growth on the instrument, because this will present you with probably different difficulties of music. I find that a lot of, like for saxophone, we just don't have a lot of standard rep that was written by people of color. Okay, but this is how it unfolded. This is based on where the instrument was born and created, and that is not in America. Right? It is a French traditional instrument in that sense, right? Born from this area. But I find that also, like, when students ask, I want to play music by people of color on saxophone, some of the more contemporary things are a bit difficult. So it also depends on level and where you are in the instrument as well, I think, can dictate who you have access to. Because unfortunately, saxophone repertoire, just for a large majority of it, didn't have a lot of different, diverse representation. And that's okay. It's certainly changing today, as we are all being more thoughtful about these things. It's just being thoughtful all the time, and not just because it's fashionable, not just because we've got events happening in the world that are causing these conversations to happen, but it's sustainable change in thought and stuff like this. That is what's going to be the difference between now and, future saxos learning music. I don't know if that even answers your question, Kyle, because I just went on a rant, but
they're familiar with that form.
Yeah. Very good.
Anybody else have questions for Kendra?
Very good. All right.
Alrighty. Well, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for letting me talk, express myself. But no, it was a pleasure hearing you both play, Philip and Maggie. Thank you so much. I